Okay, welcome. Today we're going to talk about somatic tracking again, and we're going to talk about what to do when you're having trouble with somatic tracking or you have a special need that needs to be met and it's hard to do regular somatic tracking. And so we'll talk about some different things that we can do to make it easier or to make it more accessible so that it works for you. I think a lot of times people think that when they're doing somatic tracking that it has to look a certain way, be a certain way, and then if it doesn't fit in this certain parameter, then it's not real somatic tracking. And as long as you are meeting the criteria of somatic tracking, then you're doing it fine. So those are just to remember that somatic tracking is a meditative exercise. So you want to be relaxed and in kind of a bit of a meditative state. You are going to be working to do this in a way that is with a lightness and curiosity. So you're going to have this positive effect while you're doing it. And you are also going to be reframing the messages and give yourself messages of safety. So you're going to be doing a safety reappraisal. So as long as you're doing positive effect induction, safety reappraisal, and you're approaching it from a lens of meditation, then you are doing somatic tracking and you're doing it just fine. So give yourself permission to vary the length or the place or the time that you do it so that you can make it work for you. The first one that was brought up to me was anxiety. Like, I feel really anxious, Callie. It's really hard for me to do somatic tracking because I feel really, really anxious when I do it, and it's hard to calm down. And you're right. The person that submitted this question, they're absolutely right, because if your body's in a state of fight or flight, then you're not in a nice meditative relaxed state, and therefore somatic tracking may or may not be, probably not going to be as effective as it would be as if you were relaxed and not anxious. So for people who have high anxiety, usually what I recommend doing is spending a little bit more time at the beginning of somatic tracking, putting yourself in a nice meditative, relaxed state. One way that we can control whether we're in fight or flight or rest and digest is by using our breath. We can't control a lot of the autonomic functions in our body, but we can control our breathing. And by controlling our breathing, we can slow our heart rate, and then we can kind of push our bodies out of sympathetic and into parasympathetic, which is much better and much more conducive to good somatic tracking. So the way that you do that, the way you use your breath to calm your central nervous system, is that you breathe in a way that is slow, steady, and that your exhale is longer than your inhale. So you can count however you want. You can do inhale 4, pause for 1, exhale 7, pause for 2. You can do inhale 3, pause for 3, exhale 5, pause for 3. However you want to do it, it doesn't matter. Just make sure your exhale is longer than your inhale and that it's slow and repetitive. Another way that you can do it is just to relax your body, just breathe normally, and then deliberately slow your breathing down just a tiny, tiny bit. Those are things that you can do to put yourself in a more relaxed state and to pull you out of that anxiety. If you're still anxious and you want to do somatic tracking, then we'll move on to the next idea, and that is what to do for people who have short attention spans or whose mind wanders. So if you have a short attention span, that can be an issue when you're somatic tracking for sure, because your mind wanders off or you just can't focus. There are a lot of different ways that you can deal with this. You can do the two that I like the best, I'll share with you. One of them is, sorry, I have a little head cold, so I'm sniffling. I apologize. One thing that you can do is just start with very, very, very short somatic tracking exercises. And what you're going to do is you're just going to pause, take a couple of breaths to relax, check in on the sensation or emotion, whatever you're working on, look at it, describe it, and you're done. That's it. That's all you do. Very, very short, very quick. Some people have never been taught to attend to their internal state and really have a hard time accessing their feelings and their thoughts, and that's okay. And some people just have a really hard time relaxing. So, short periods, start short, and then build up your tolerance so that you can do it for longer periods of time. The other way to do it, I have a video on my YouTube channel, is where you use your breath as a sensory home base and you use breathing, and then you just let your mind go wherever it's going to go. You check in on the sensation and bring it back to the breath. And you breathe, breathe, let your mind go where it's going to go. Check the sensation, say hello, bring it back to the breath. So, what you're doing is you're just letting your mind wander. Wherever it goes is fine. And then you check, you track very quickly, and you bring it back to the breath. And this is a great way to do it if you're a person whose mind wanders off. Um, you can always remember, too, when you catch yourself with your mind wandering, bring it back to your breath, recenter, and then go back to the sensation. So, those are some little tips for people who have short attention spans or who are a little bit anxious. All right. The next question I got was about when sensations are overwhelming and you're really afraid of them. Again, somatic tracking is effective when you feel safe. If the safety reappraisal part is not in place, then you're just reinforcing that pain is dangerous. So we don't want that to be something that is standing in our way of having a successful and a successful somatic tracking experience or a corrective experience. Okay. So there are some ways to deal with this. I think my preferred way is to use what's called a sensory home base. So I talked a minute ago about using your breath as a home base. You breathe, let your mind wander, come back. So when I first started somatic tracking, I had a really hard time with it. It was very difficult for me to do. I ended up doing positive sensations probably for the first 6 months only because I couldn't somatic track. And what would happen for me is I would be somatic tracking and I would be looking at my sensations in my body, and they were scary, and then I'd feel fear, and then it was over. I needed to be more anchored, and so what my therapist had me do was she had me use a cold anchor that I held in my hand, and I'll talk to you in a minute about how to do that. I also have on my YouTube, I also have a video explaining in more detail how to use an anchor. You can use a warm anchor, you can use a cold anchor, you can use a soft anchor, whatever you want, but the sensation has to be strong enough that it's more than your pain. And that for me, when I would try to use my breath was a very neutral sensation, but my pain was a really strong sensation. Even if it wasn't high, I was so afraid of it that I would get sucked into it and just couldn't come out. So by using a cold sensory home base, and I was able to come back and forth in and out of the pain much easier. So what I would do is I would start my meditative part of my practice by relaxing, and I would relax without this. I would just wait a second before I picked it up, and I would just get nice and relaxed as I could. Then I would pick up my sensory home base and turn my attention to this sensory home base and what it felt like in my hand, and that it's cold, but it's safe. I can control it. I can even put it down if I need to. It's safe. It's a safe sensation, but it's a strong sensation. I mean, it's cold, but it's not hurting me. It's not damaging my tissues. It's safe. So I would go from my breathing, then I would make this then my home base. And this is where my attention would go. And I would go then from this sensation of cold in my hand to the sensation of discomfort in my body. And I would somatic track it. And when I would start to feel like, oh, okay, I've had enough, I would go back here. So where I could not take myself back to my breath, because my breath wasn't a strong enough sensation, I could take myself back to this cold sensory feeling in my hand. And that was how I learned how to somatic track, actually, was by using an external sensory home base. Like I said, it doesn't have to be cold, it can be something else, but it just has to be strong enough that it can pull you away from your pain easily. Okay. So when you have a painful sensation that you're afraid of, you're going to go really, really quickly. You're not going to spend a lot of time tracking it. You're just going to go looking at it, say, that's curious, that's interesting, cool, nice to see ya, and then right back. Okay. So you're not going to spend a lot of time tracking it. You're not going to spend 5 minutes investigating it, watching it move, do all that stuff. You're just going to go say hello, track it for a bit, come back to the sensation. This is one too where you can go back and forth if you want. Sensation, sensation in your body, sensation in your hand to the sensation in your body, back and forth. You can do that if you want to. So that is called external sensory home base. Really powerful tool if you are afraid of your pain, or if you kind of get sucked into it and can't keep that safety reappraisal going. This was super helpful for me, surprisingly to me at the time, but now that I do this all the time, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. My pain gets worse during somatic tracking and I don't feel safe. Usually, when you are somatic tracking and you feel an intensity in your pain, that's actually not something that you need to be really sad about. Your pain, any kind of changing that it makes, if it gets better, if it gets worse, if it moves, if it becomes, if it goes from throbbing to burning, any of those things are actually really positive signs. So, one thing that you can do is mentally reframe. Oh, my pain is getting worse too. Oh, my brain's paying attention. Okay. And there's nothing to be afraid of. It's just a sensation. Remind yourself over again, it's just a sensation. It's just a sensation. I don't need to be afraid of it. However, if you find yourself coming out of this safety reappraisal mode and into fear mode, stop. Okay. Um, Track for shorter periods of time. So if you are finding that your pain is increasing and mentally you're going into fear mode, that's not good. What I want you to do then is somatic track for short bursts. The first idea that I had, where you're just going to go in, look at it, and then leave, that's what you're going to do also if you find that you're afraid. And then you can build up tolerance over time when your brain gets the message, oh, it's okay. I'm not going to be hurt anymore. It's fine. Okay. So that's my recommendation for that. There's also other things that you can try, but that's what I would try first. I disassociate when I somatic track. Disassociation kind of means that you feel like your spirit is leaving your body and that you're kind of looking at yourself from somewhere else. That's what dissociation is like you're out of your body. Um, this happens sometimes with people who've had some significant trauma and they coped with that by disassociation. One thing that you can do that might be helpful if you are feeling like you're not in your body when you're meditating is to try doing it not laying down, not sitting up, but to try doing it while you're walking or riding a bicycle or something else. It can't be anything that requires too much thought because you want your thoughts to be focused on the sensation in your body. But some people find that walking gently outside in nature and somatic tracking the sensations while they're walking helps them be more in their body. And so that's one suggestion for someone who's having a hard time staying in their body, is to just walk and track at the same time and see if that doesn't help. Um, Go someplace where it's safe, where you're not going to trip, where you don't need to be super focused, where you can kind of be in this relaxed, nice state. But we want to be somatic tracking while we're moving and see if that doesn't make a difference in feeling like you're staying with yourself. The next question I was asked was, what about graded exposure? Graded exposure is when you use somatic tracking to get back to doing things that you haven't been able to do for a while. Graded exposure, we do it with sitting, we do it with walking, we do it with standing for long periods of time. Sometimes we do graded exposure when we're exposing ourselves to something that's a trigger, like sunlight or food or drink that has triggered us in the past. We'll use what's called graded exposure. Alan, there is a video somewhere out there of Alan doing graded exposure with a woman where he asks her to raise her arm to trigger pain. So she's in a place right now she doesn't have overall pain, but when she raises her arm, she gets pain. So he's having her trigger the pain by her movement and then somatic tracking it. And that's called graded exposure. This is another time. So if you have knees that get sore when you walk, an arm that's sore when you lift it, back that hurts when you pick things up, even though you know that it's healed and there's nothing wrong with it. Those are all types of things that you can use somatic tracking and graded exposure for. I had a client once that we used a yoga position, the cat and cow, to trigger enough pain in his back that he was able to somatic track. So, so what it means is you are purposefully exposing yourself to the pain, okay? And then you're doing somatic tracking on it. And if you want graded exposure, you can alternate pain, positive sensation, pain, positive sensation, okay? So if there is something that you can do that makes your body feel good. Some people, it's deep breathing. Other people, it might be, feeling the sun on your face. Other people might be petting your pet. So I brought, my cat will not cooperate. I don't know where he is, but he is not a cooperative pet most of the time. But sometimes I use him for positive sensations practice. But I brought this guy to do positive sensations with right now. We'll pretend he's my cat. So if I were going to do graded exposure, say I had a shoulder injury and I was going to do a graded exposure and then positive sensations alternating, and say I had my little pet on my lap, or we'll just pretend he's my pet. What you would do is you would, first of all, bring the pain on, not too sharp. We don't want it to be over a 5. And we're going to check it out. Okay. So I'm assuming that you've already done your relaxation. You're in a nice, calm, meditative place. You bring on the pain. You look at it. Oh, that's interesting. It's in my shoulder and it feels really tight. It's kind of hot. Oh, that's interesting. And then you let that down. Okay. You let the pain go away. And then you pet your cat for a minute, or your dog. Okay. All right. And then you can go back and do it again. And then you go back to the nice sensation, the soothing sensation of taking, okay. You can also use your breath for that. I think the lady in the demo actually could make her hands tingle. And that was a positive sensation for her. So she'd go from lifting her arm to the tingly hands. I can't make my hands tingle. I think that's kind of cool, but I can't do it. So I use an external sensory experience instead. Okay. What to do if I don't have pain anymore? Well, congratulations if you don't have pain anymore. what do? You can actually somatic track emotions. You can somatic track anxiety. You can somatic track fatigue. And so say you're feeling a powerful emotion, somatic track that instead of somatic tracking a painful sensation in your body. Okay. So I think one thing that people often misunderstand about this work is they think they're going to do it and be done. For me, I wasn't able to do it and be done. I still practice every day, still somatic track or lean into positive sensations. I still practice really good self-care. So those are important things to remember, that you're going to be doing this probably in a maintenance kind of way for the rest of your life. So you want to be finding practices that feel good to you and that you enjoy and that you think you can do for the rest of your life. Because um, you you didn't get this way because you are a calm and um, person that doesn't have life stress or whatever other reasons or personality traits. You are who you are. And so I just come to realize that I'm a pleaser perfectionist and I have a lot of stress and a little bit of anxiety. And so for me, taking care of myself, I do it every single day because it's worth it. Right. Um, what to do when you have fatigue? Say, Callie, I don't have pain, but boy, my fatigue, I don't know what to do. Fatigue is something that you can somatic track. It is not something that um, you have to not treat at all. It's a little bit different because fatigue is there's fight, flight, rest and digest, and then there's freeze. And fatigue is on that freeze part of your body, and it's actually kind of more of your lizard brain that causes you to freeze. And so um, chronic fatigue can be challenging to treat because it's one of your most freeze is one of your most fundamental responses. It's so primal and deep that people get really frustrated trying to treat their chronic fatigue because it's like it's not getting better. It will get better, but it sometimes takes a little longer. But with somatic tracking, what you can do is you track the sensation of fatigue in your body. And sometimes when you've been fatigued a long time, you're like, I don't know what you mean. Well, track what it feels like in your brain. Do you feel cognitively slower? Do you feel like you're not, your head's not attached to your body? What does that feel like? Do you feel heaviness in your feet? Do you feel like your feet are covered with cement? Do you feel kind of this slowness in your heart and in your gut? Where do you feel it? Are your hands heavy? So you have to really kind of be a little bit meta about this and start thinking about how you're thinking, how your body feels, and really get into your body. But yes, when you're chronic fatigue, you can use somatic tracking to um, to track that feeling of fatigue and be less. So why would you do that? So remember that chronic pain is fueled by fear, and usually people with um, chronic fatigue don't really think of themselves as fearful, but actually it is a fear response. What place is safer than at home in your bed? There's nothing bad's going to happen to you probably at home, tucked up in your bed. It's super, super safe. So if your brain wants to keep you safe and it really is adamant about it and fight and flight haven't helped, you may go to freeze, and that's chronic fatigue. So that's what's going on with you. So anyway, just a little information for you. Let's see what else. Um, I think I got them all. I think I got all the questions. I'm going to put on my glasses now and look at the chat. Somebody made a comment. Let's see what it says here. It says in last week's session, you said somatic tracking wasn't effective if pain was greater than level 5. Is this true if you're using a strong anchor? Well, you don't want the strong anchor to be over a level 5. So yeah. So when I'm using my cold pack, it's strong, but it's not something I'm afraid of. And if it's too cold for you, then wrap it in a piece of cloth or something like that. But yeah, you're right. You don't want it to become something that you're afraid of. Yeah. But with somatic tracking, the reason why we don't track over level 5 pain is it's really hard to stay out of the fear space when your pain's over a 5. Whereas when you're using a neutral sensation, that isn't the same thing because you're not afraid of it, right? You're controlling it. You can put it down if you need to. The thing about chronic pain is that you don't have the control, right? And so that's part of the fear. All right. That's a good question. Do you suggest describing the pain out loud or to yourself during tracking? Oh, that's a really good question. When I track by myself, I don't talk out loud. Usually, it's an internal dialogue. But you can do whatever you're comfortable with, and if you have the privacy to talk out loud, I think that would be awesome. Actually, it'd be really good. We talked about last time about somatic tracking being like show and tell. So there's the tell component, which are your thoughts and words that you use to speak to your critical mind. And then there's the show part. You're showing it by being calm and at peace and at rest while you're tracking that you're not afraid. That's the show part that talks to your nervous system. And so there's both components are equally important when we're somatic tracking, that we show our brains and nervous systems and that we tell our brains and nervous systems that we're safe, we're okay, and we don't need to be afraid of our pain. What if you can't feel the outcome independence? It's very difficult for me to accept the sensations and just watch them and not care about getting rid of it. I want to get rid of it because it's affected my life so drastically. How do I become outcome independent, etc.? Wow, that's a heavy question, and it's hard, isn't it? Outcome independence is something that has to be practiced, and you may not be perfectly outcome independent at first. And let me be perfectly honest. We say verbally as coaches and therapists, we say, really what we're trying to do is we're trying to change your relationship with your pain. We're not trying to make your pain go away. We're just trying to teach your brain that it's nothing to be afraid of. Yes, that is true. However, we are all here because we want to get rid of our pain, right? We didn't come here because we want to make friends with it or feel comfortable with it or feel happy about it or feel outcome independent about it. We're here because we're in pain, we're suffering, it hurts, and we want it to stop. So let's be honest about that, okay? So how to be outcome independent? It takes practice. I find that outcome independence it helps if I remember that I'm going to be okay either way. No matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. And some of the different mantras that I've used over the years have had to do with I'm going to be okay. I'm okay now, and I'm going to be okay. No matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. And just keep reminding myself that outcome independence when you're somatic tracking is really what outcome independence when you're somatic tracking really means is that if the pain goes up, great. If it goes down, great. If it moves, great. If it stays the same place, great. If it goes from burning to prickling, awesome. If it's an itch, that's fine. So outcome independence when you're somatic tracking isn't as complicated as some people make it out to be. It really does have to do with being okay with whatever your pain does while you're somatic tracking. So if you understand that somatic tracking is about retraining your brain, it's not about bringing pain down in the moment. That's something else. Those are avoidance and self-soothing behaviors. And if ever you guys want to talk about that and have me talk about that in a Zoom session, maybe a little more interactively, we can do that. But really, if you're working to bring pain levels down, you're doing something different than somatic tracking. Somatic tracking is brain training. It is not pain reducing. Now, when Alan does somatic tracking, often pain goes down. When I do somatic tracking with my clients, pain goes down. When I do somatic tracking with myself, not as much. That's why sometimes working with a partner can be helpful if you're hoping for pain relief. However, it's better not to. It's better not even to bring that into the equation. It's better to say, this is about training my brain that it doesn't need to be afraid of my pain. And not even bringing pain relief into the somatic tracking equation. Sorry. I think it would be helpful sometimes if you guys could see videos of Alan when he has to pivot when people aren't out of pain, but you guys don't get to see those. So there's this kind of false expectation that you're going to somatic track for a couple of minutes. You're going to move your head back and forth really slowly, and all of a sudden your neck pain will be gone. That doesn't happen very often, and to recognize and understand that. And that the pain will come back. Matter of fact, in that video, if you've watched it recently, Alan tells her, says, your pain's gone now, but it'll be back. So just so you know. What if you can't feel the outcome independence? Oh, okay. Okay. That's another outcome. Is that Paula again? Oh, it's Paula both times. Okay. Yeah. So that's outcome independence is really hard, Paula, but you can do it. Just try not to couple it with somatic tracking at all. Just say, I'm going to somatic track now. And this is about me just being curious about my pain. And whatever happens, happens. Outcome independence in other areas of your life can help you develop outcome independence with chronic pain as well. So if you have things going on in your life that you're concerned about, worried about, ruminating about, if you can learn some outcome independence about that kind of stuff, then that can actually carry over into some of your chronic pain work. Alan tells a story. I don't know if he tells it in The Way Out, but he tells it in one of his, I think it's probably in the TMS wiki, but he tells a story about Tina Fey and about how she went to her therapist and she was like, should I quit my job and have kids, or should I keep working on my career? And the answer was, either way, it'll be okay. And once she came to the conclusion that either or would be fantastic and it would be a fine outcome, she actually ended up doing both, having kids and continuing her career. So, but he tells that little story, and I think that if we can practice outcome independence in other areas of our lives, it will help us practice outcome independence with our chronic pain and help us be a little bit more. I think sometimes we're really impatient and we want it to go away now. And the first question people ask me a lot when they're hiring me to coach them is, how long is this going to take? I don't know. Depends on how well you're able to convince your brain that you're safe, and how well you're able to distract yourself, and how much self-care and self-compassion you're able to show, and what kind of intensity you bring to the work. Super important to remember that mindset and intensity are very, very important. So staying positive, and not in a toxic way, but keeping hope alive is really important. And also approaching it with some lightness and curiosity and less intensity. And intensity is like not at all good when you're trying to do somatic tracking and when you're trying to get out of chronic pain. The less intense about it you can be, the better. And I know it's really hard to do. It's easy for me to say you need to be less intense, but the truth is, the less intensity you bring to the process, the more open and curious you can be about it, the sooner you're going to get well, and the sooner you're going to feel better. Okay. Any other questions that anybody wants to ask me? I'll wait here for a minute just to see if there's any other questions that show up in the chat. Looks like we're done. Well, I'd like to thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you for taking time out of your day to spend with me and to discuss these things. I hope I was able to answer a lot of your questions or give you some ideas of things you could do differently to make somatic tracking more approachable for you. I will post the video of this session on my YouTube channel, and I will post the link to the video. If you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat, on the group, okay, in the group chat, and I will answer them when I have time and opportunity. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Callie.